What if I told you the BRZ isn't just inspired by the 240SX, but it is the modern day 240SX of this generation. Its lightweight configuration, front engine rear wheel drive platform, it is affordable and it is easily modifiable, and the aftermarket companies flock to it like there's no tomorrow. There are endless amounts of aftermarket parts for these cars because of these very reasons. The blueprint hasn't changed, just the badge, which conveniently enough, there's multiple badges for this very platform, as you know. Today we are diving into why the BRZ GT86 might just be the spiritual successor, aka this long lost stepchild of the 240SX. From its raw driving dynamics to its massive aftermarket, and even all the engine swaps that have already been done on it. So with all that said, let's break down the GT86 BRZ platform and figure out what exactly makes this the modern day S chassis. So for beginners, let's talk about the philosophy and kind of the overall mindset that sets these cars apart and at the same time makes them extremely similar. We have the BRZ behind me, which is a front engine rear wheel drive layout. It's very affordable and it's easy to modify, and it's a great entry level car. Now, back in the early to mid 2000s, when I first started getting into cars heavily, the 240SXs were everywhere. There were two cars that you owned back then. You were either a Honda guy or you couldn't afford the more expensive cars, so you ended up in a 240SX being rear wheel drive platform. So instead of going out and making a rather large payment on something like a Mark IV Supra or a new 350Z or something of that nature, you would start off with a older, probably at that time 10 to 15 year old 240SX and slowly build it up. Now in the US, we had the 240SX, obviously. Overseas, you had the S13, S14 chassis. I'm not really gonna touch on the S15 as they we never even got them here. So I'm gonna talk mostly about the S13, S14 chassis here. Typically, people would buy the S13, S14 chassis and slowly build them up over time. And the parts they would use would come from something none other than this car right here. This is my Z32 300ZX, as most of you probably on this channel are very familiar with. Oftentimes, the first thing most 240SX owners would do would be swap a lot of the drivetrain and brake components from the Z32 chassis over to their S13, S14 chassis. But most of the time, the very first thing they would do would be swap the engine. Because back then, the common consensus was that the 240SX KA24DE engine was no good. However, I always kind of had a slight feeling that this engine was extremely underrated. And by today's standards, well, it definitely is, because I've seen multiple people in the last couple of years make north of 800 horsepower out of a KA24DE, especially with the little bit of product development that has been done for it. It is basically a truck motor. Nobody wanted to play around with those. Everyone wanted the overseas SR20. Now the problem that I have with the SR20 is the moment you swap it into your car, you're losing half a liter of displacement. Okay, like 0.4 liters of displacement. But in terms of being a 2 liter, that's like a quarter of your displacement. Gone, poof, bye. Not to mention the SR20 is all aluminum block. The biggest pro to swapping to an SR20 is, well, simply that it's already turbocharged. But you're going through all this hassle swapping out the entire motor, getting an ECU to work with it. Whatever you gotta do to get this new engine to work in your car, when you could just go ahead and turbocharge your KA24. Now, hindsight 2020, back then there were not many turbo kits available for the KA24. However, that doesn't mean that there weren't any turbo kits available, because I believe back then it would have been cheaper to just go ahead and make a turbo kit or buy whatever turbo kit is available on the market and make that work for your KA versus swapping in an SR20. Same thing goes for the RBs. However, back then, it was kind of the same idea. If you're gonna swap in an SR20, why not spend the money and just get an RB26, RB25? Because at least then, you're keeping the same displacement. If you're gonna do it, you might as well not lose any displacement. Although, admittedly, I do understand that the RB motor takes considerably more work as it was not native to the 240SX platform. Same goes for the JZ. I've even heard through close friends that have done these swaps already that the JZ is actually an easier swap into a 240SX platform than an RB is. Kind of ironic considering the JZ is from a completely different manufacturer. Also, if you guys have not already, be sure to head over to the Billy Belt website for merchandise. We got t-shirts on there. This is my No Worries shirt for my Z32 peeps. For everyone else, I do have a few generic stuff on there. If you're interested in anything at all, let's say just to work on the vehicles and you want something cheap that you don't want to ruin some of your nicer clothes, I got you. For instance, this is my Built Not Bought shirt. It's on there as well. Go ahead, hit the link, check out the website. Let's get back into this video for now. Now, the biggest idea with these cars is that, well, they were an affordable entry-level sports car that was supposed to get good miles per gallon. The 240SX, granted, in the US, it did come with a truck motor, but I do believe that was just because Nissan was trying to cut corners and save pennies, simply because we never got the SR20 and anything else over here. So why would they bring a motor that they don't put in anything else? Well, to put in one car that's just going to be made overseas still. Basically, they weren't going to supply any parts for this motor over here anyways, so why would they put that motor in one car? Which honestly, it makes sense. Being that it was as affordable as it was, it's kind of the same mindset of the people that are buying the GT86 BRZ platform. You just end up with a very wide range of folks buying these cars. Now that could be your old grandmas that just want a good economic car that looks good and is kind of sporty. Maybe they're retired, they don't drive the car much. Those are going to be your gems later on, probably, well, in another 5 to 10 years when people are looking for clean examples to buy and, well, modify. Now, for a lot of people, this might be their first car that they start modifying or changing or even turbocharging. For example, look at TJ Hunt. I don't think he had touched a car or a wrench on a car at all before he got his BRZ. Which leads me to my next point, and that is the general car community and culture of these particular platforms. If you're on any of the pages or forums, you probably see a lot of common questions that are generally asked on, well, every other automotive page as kind of like, hey, this is my first time modifying a car, or driving a car with a stick shift, or whatever it might be. What kind of oil do I use, kind of thing, you know? Those are the type of people that bought these cars. And it was kind of the same thing with the 240SX as well. It was kind of your grassroots drifters back then. The guys that just wanted to get into a car and pretend they were in Tokyo Drift, or slap an intake and exhaust and some cheap tires on the rear and go burn through a set in a weekend and come back home and just continue to repeat. Many of these grassroots drifters were driving their cars to the track, drifting them, burning through multiple sets of tires, and then coming home on steel belts, basically. It was actually kind of nuts back then, especially in Florida. I had multiple friends with these cars that, well, some of them didn't even make it to the track and they would just go to your local cul-de-sac or warehouse back then. But that definitely beats your, well, local intersection takeover kids. What the heck is wrong with you guys? And with all that said, just like back then, the BRZ GT86 platform is kind of the go-to new car for anyone that wants to get in any kind of, well, autocross racing or drifting or anything of that nature. If you're gonna get into drifting, you're probably looking at one of these cars right now. The 350Zs are starting to get kind of old. These cars are lightweight chassis. Every single engine has been swapped into them. I'm gonna get into that later on. We're gonna touch on that. And let's say you're not even into drifting. You just want a general performance car that has, well, maybe the potential later on, but you just want a reliable daily driver at the same time for now. Well, that's kind of why I got my car, honestly. At the time that I bought mine, I was running through a lot of problems trying to daily drive a 20-year-old Honda CRX with an engine swap. It was not a fun time, and I was trying to work a full-time job and go to school full-time. I just didn't have time to continue to repair my 20-something-year-old Honda CRX with an engine swap. With that, I went ahead and I turned around and I bought this car in about 2015. So it's been an easy, almost 10 years exactly now with this car. And it has been mostly painless. In general, people that have these cars typically have a good understanding that this is a great blank canvas. Now, do we all expect to make 500 to 600 horsepower out of a factory motor? Absolutely not. Same could be said for the KA24DE. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure the record for a stock unopened KA24DE is somewhere in the 450, 500 horsepower range, which is actually really good. It might even be more than that. To be honest, I've never really paid too much attention, but at the end of the day, remember, Those are just supposed to be truck motors that came in your typical Nissan Pathfinder or hardbody pickup. But as far as the BRZ GT86 platforms go, we understand that this is a great blank canvas, as in it is a great platform to start with. You can either choose to work with the factory motor that's in the car, which is actually a plenty capable motor if built properly and maintained properly. Or you can put everything from a Honda K-Series into it, which is becoming very popular. Or if you really want to go crazy, we've even seen Ferrari engines stuffed into these things. I'm looking at you, Ryan Turk, with your red GT86. Absolutely crazy, which ironically enough, that's the same guy that made this video right here about 15 years ago in his off season of drifting. And I would say that that probably kicked off the automotive modified culture for a lot of people that are still modifying cars to this day. Now, along with the fact that this is a great blank canvas, well, what comes along with that is plenty of aftermarket support, because these aftermarket companies realize that, hey, this is kind of the same genre of people that got into the 240SX back in the day, and those guys went crazy. So maybe we should, start pumping up and developing parts for these cars, because it's going to be a very popular platform. And as such, that is exactly what has happened. I remember back in 2013 when Full Blown Motorsports first built their turbo kit and they posted it. They made 400 something horsepower the first go around, and by the time they were done with it, they made over 600 horsepower on a stock unopened lawn block. How long did that motor last? Probably not too long, but a lot of people don't even realize that they made that kind of power with a factory F820 and a stock transmission, which is freaking crazy by today's standards, because nobody would even think to try to make 600 horsepower out of an unopened F820. But does that mean it's impossible? Absolutely not. Turbo technology has come a long way. These turbos are spooling much quicker, making a lot more torque down low, and as such, well, that's causing a lot of the motors to pop sooner rather than later. The general populace that buys these cars doesn't really have the best foundation as for what they're doing when working on vehicles to begin with. Another perfect example, much like my 300ZX VG30 behind me, where, well, swapping the motor doesn't make you a better mechanic, technician, car builder, whatever you want to call yourself. All motors have a problem, and well, it's just a matter of how serious the problem is and how you go about said problem. For instance, these motors in particular like to spin rod bearings. The best thing you can do to prevent that is, well, maintain good oil pressure and oil temps. And of course, keep the oil pickup clean and free of any kind of debris such as RTV. I'm looking at you, Toyota technicians that do the timing cover recalls. And the aftermarket parts that typically mimic that of, well, let's say a 240SX, are typically that of what most drift cars, I would say, would use, such as angle kits, I believe they're called, lower control arms, coilovers. I mean, you could get that for any car, but a lot of the same thought process that goes into making the 240SX what it is into a drift car pretty much goes hand in hand with what these cars need. Also, funny enough, the 240SX originally comes with a 4-lug bolt pattern on their wheels, and most people swap them out for a 5-lug. Kind of a similar instance with these, however, they are already 5-lug. However, it's 5x100 instead of the more common 5x114, which is mostly used with drift cars, and well, it's just a more common wheel lug pattern. So you have more options for wheels. Now, this is where I think the similarities truly shine. And it goes back to the whole idea of, well, both of these cars are excellent blank canvases. And, well, to dive right into it, it's engine swaps. These cars have already been swapped with every single engine you could almost think of out there. I've seen VR6 swaps. Shout out to my boy down in Fort Myers, Moses. Ferrari 458 swaps, LS2JZ, RB26 with all-wheel drive, all the way down to Honda K-Series swaps, which are becoming more and more popular now. But the biggest thing with the Honda K-Series engines is that they're already known for making north of 500 horsepower, completely unopened with E85, and you could run them just about all day like that. Well, almost. A lot of the drift guys that are swapping to the Honda K-Series motors are finding out very fast that once you put that 500 horsepower into a drift car and beat the snot out of it, really starts to put heavy wear and tear on that engine, and it starts to show its true colors. So realistically, a Honda K-Series engine is most happy between the 4 to 450 horsepower range, which at the end of the day isn't too much more power than this motor is capable of. However, I will say that once the Honda engine is built correctly, it will more than likely be able to hold more power and be more reliable than almost any Subaru motor. I'm kind of siding with the Honda guys on this one, I'm sorry. Does that mean I'm going to be swapping my motor and my BRZ anytime soon? Probably not. I think I'm going to try to ride out this motor for as long as possible. However, if I were to ever buy a drift car in the future, it would probably be one of these, and I'll probably end up stuffing some sort of V8 into it. Now, I'm sure a lot of you S chassis fanboys have already been cursing at me through your computer and through your phones, tablets, whatever you're watching this video through, because you truly think that this car is nothing similar to your legendary S chassis from 1992. Well, newsflash, those cars are outrageously overpriced nowadays. I mean, you're seeing complete donor shells that are being sold for $2,000+ when the only thing good on them still is the floor pans. It's absolutely ridiculous. So as far as having a car with parts that are readily available, this is it right here for me, because, well, honestly, they're still making them, and the new chassis, I would say, is very similar to this one. As far as I can remember, the S chassis here in the US came with the same KA24DE for the entire lifetime that car was being sold here. Although I will say that is a testament to how reliable those motors were. However, for some stupid reason, most people would prefer to swap the KA24 out for an SR20 from overseas and then repeatedly blow that up and try to rebuild it numerous times to make 500-600 horsepower when you could do the same with just a KA24. Which leads me back to my whole point of, well, maybe we're just missing something with the FA20 and we don't actually need to swap the engine out for something like a Honda K-Series. Although I can completely understand the V8 point of it, because if you want to drift the car and you want it to be reliable enough to make the power, spin the tires, and do it repeatedly without any issues, you could definitely make an NA 450 to 500 horsepower out of an LS very easily, and the motor will fit perfectly in this car. That's right, I said probably a V8 motor in one of these would probably be best for drifting over a turbocharged 4-cylinder. Also, one final note, let's not forget that in this day and age, manual rear-wheel drive cars that focus on the driving feel rather than, well, just sheer numbers and power are very rare nowadays. You don't get that with any other vehicle that I can think of that's on the market. Maybe a Toyota GR Corolla, the Honda FL5, I believe they are called now. I can't even keep track anymore. Those are probably some of the few manual cars on the market that are still remaining. For instance, the stick shift. It's not electronic, it doesn't have cables, it doesn't have bushings, it's raw, it's connected directly to the transmission. You slam a gear, you feel it. If you miss shift, you feel it. If you don't hit the clutch just right, you're gonna feel that through the stick shift. The steering feel is unmatched in this car. It's just a phenomenally well-built car that is extremely undervalued and underappreciated. So in a sense, this car kind of fits me in those regards. So in all, if you're looking to get into a car that you can easily modify, test drive on the weekend, have a little bit of fun at the track, and it's just easily moddable, this is it. This is literally the perfect canvas for any person looking to get into, especially a JDM car of today's day and age. These are getting older, they're becoming more affordable, they are becoming much more common. They're going on their 12th year of making them now. So do me a favor, if you guys also think that the BRZ GT86 platform is also the 240SX of this day and age, drop a comment, let me know what you think. But again, thank you all so much for watching, I appreciate every single one of you. If you haven't already, don't forget to check out the website, get yourself some Billy Built merch, and we'll catch y'all next time. Thanks, take care.